Are you tired of feeling like the bad guy when trying to get your kids or your partner to follow through on commitments? Well, in this episode, we're tackling the art of assertive communication and how it can completely revolutionize your family dynamic. Get ready for some major aha moments that will help you rethink your approach to cooperation at home. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm your host, Kendra Nielsen, and today we're tackling a challenge many parents face, which is encouraging follow through without becoming the family dictator. Easier said than done. So many of my clients have been asking me about this lately, and I was thinking, you know what? I feel like I even need to brush up on that a little bit because it's so easy to go into that dictator role or that nag role. So we're going to unpack that today and how to do it more effectively. I want you to imagine this scenario. So it's a Tuesday evening and you're staring at this mountain of dishes that your spouse promised to clean up after dinner, but here you are feeling the weight of those unmet expectations. And not only that, but your teenager's room looks like a complete disaster, no matter how many times you reminded them to tidy up, and you just feel like you're at your wit's end. Does that sound familiar? Because you're not the only one that feels this way, just completely overwhelmed and irritated and filled with resentment. As parents and spouses, we often find ourselves in these situations where we need others to follow through on their commitments, but we don't know how to do that very effectively without feeling like that dictator or that nag. So what do? How do we do this without resorting to micromanaging or controlling behavior? Because it's so easy to cross that line. Well, today I'm going to give you some simple strategies on how to encourage that cooperation while maintaining that respect and harmony in your relationships. Let's talk about the cost of control. When a parent is controlling, a few things happen. First and foremost, like I already mentioned, that resentment really grows. So when you have somebody that's constantly nagging you or micromanaging you, that breeds that resentment. You're probably thinking of someone right now that does that, and it makes you want to clench your teeth and almost push back because they're doing it. You almost want to do the opposite. Another thing it can do is decrease motivation. So when people feel controlled, they lose that motivation to complete tasks. And sometimes it can be a stubbornness thing. Like on my part, I feel like the more I'm pushed, the more I'll dig in my heels, depending on who it is. And then the third thing it can do is increase stress. So when you try to control everything, it's completely exhausting and increases your stress levels, as you probably have figured out as you've been trying to micromanage everyone around you. It's just not very effective. I mentioned micromanaging. Well, if you don't know what that is, that's when you are constantly trying to help others, whether they want that help or not, and it doesn't even really look like help a lot of the times. So when you're micromanaging, you're constantly checking in or correcting your kids' work, say maybe their homework, or hovering over your child as they load the dishwasher and point out every little thing that they're doing wrong. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you're thinking your spouse does it or somebody else, but maybe look inside too. Another thing to avoid is sarcasm. When you use hurtful humor, that can really turn people away. For example, you might say something like, "Oh, I see the laundry fairy hasn't visited your room yet." And just kind of this condescending tone where either your teen or whoever wants to roll their eyes or they just want to now not do it even more. Another thing to avoid is being bossy or demeaning. So giving orders without consideration. I see this a lot with my clients. Because their children are younger, they can boss them around more. But if the tables were turned, we would not respond well at all to somebody doing the same thing to us. I'm going to give you an example right here. Maybe you're saying something like, "Clean your room now because I said so." Like there's no explanation. There's just this very bossy, sassy kind of like, "No, I have power over you, so you're going to do it because I told you so." And that's kind of an old style of parenting that we recognize is not effective anymore. But that's still a lot of people's go-to because that's how they were raised. The thing to avoid is aggressive communication. So this is when you raise your voice or make threats. For example, you might say something like, "If you don't mow the lawn by Sunday, you're grounded for a week." Now, we say these types of things all the time, but when we're raising our voice and making threats, all this does is encourages this rebellion or this hard heart. It's not this collaboration. And it requires more of us to stay grounded, and it's more of a lazy way to parent, and it's just not effective. And last but not least, nagging. So that is repeated reminders, often in this exasperated tone or irritation. You know what nagging looks like. But it might be said like this: "How many times do I have to tell you to put your shoes away?" Now, as a parent, we can very much relate to that because we tell our kids that all the time, or maybe their socks, or make their bed, or load the dishes, whatever that might be. But those are key ones we want to avoid. Now, I'm going to give you a few effective strategies for encouraging follow through. Of course, I have to mention very briefly the I statements. So instead of blaming, express how their actions affect you. For example, "I feel overwhelmed when I'm doing the chores alone. Can we divide them up?" Like maybe that's something you say to your spouse. Or another thing you can do is set those expectations clearly and calmly. For example, "Can you please have the dishes done by 8 p.m. so we can relax together before bed?" Or maybe somebody won't be as responsive to that, depending on the person. So you could say something like this instead: "Is there a reason the dishes can't be done by 8 p.m. so we can just relax together?" So giving them that choice, allowing them to be able to give some sort of feedback instead of just doing everything that you say. And I want to say here briefly, it is very common in most relationships for one spouse to be more dialed in and very focused and more of the manager of the home. And that person often tends to be the one that can fall into that space where they nag or they micromanage, trying to manage the home effectively. But often we are overcorrecting and we go into that other space. The third thing you can do is probably one of the most effective that I see with my clients and in my own parenting, and that's offer choices. Like with my son, I know that he does not like waking up for church. It's really, really hard for him to go. So I remind him the night before, and I think to myself, okay, what choices can I give him where he feels like he's in control, that he has power? And so I say things like, "Did you want to shower tonight or tomorrow for church?" And then in the morning, I wake him up at, say, 7:30, and I say, "Hey, did you want to get up now and get ready for church, or do you want to sleep for a bit longer?" Obviously, he'll say a bit longer. It's like, "Okay, when do you want me to wake you up? In 15 minutes or in 20 minutes? What do you think?" And then he'll give me his feedback, and he feels like he's in control, and there's such a better response to that. And it took us a long time to figure that out. And just giving him as many choices as possible is so effective with his one child, whereas other children might not need it as much. Another simple thing you can do is acknowledge efforts. So reinforce that positive behavior with very specific praise. For example, "Thanks so much for putting away your backpack without being asked. It really helps keep the hallway tidy and prevents things from getting stuck in the vacuum." Kids perk up. They need to hear that specific praise and how it makes life easier and is appreciated. We all need to hear that, right? Another thing you can do is collaborate on solutions. And I talked about this a little bit, but this is another one with a lot of my clients that ends up being the most successful. So involve them in that problem solving. For example, we've been struggling getting out of the door on time in the mornings. So what ideas do you have to make that routine go smoother? So nobody misses the bus, so we're not frantic and getting angry. Like, what do you suggest? Because I feel like you have really good ideas. And that makes them feel like they do have this sense of power and there's this buy-in, and they're also more committed to following through with that solution. And the last suggestion is letting go of perfection. This can be really hard for parents because they really want things run so well, and they often forget that their children are very young or different ages, and developmentally, it's not realistic to have very high expectations. So just accept that these tasks might not be done as you would have them done. My husband and I just started this new routine where once a month, him and I will clean for like an hour or 90 minutes. Like we'll really get the deep cleaning done in the house together. It's amazing how great it looks because we kind of forget about that since the kids have been doing the chores so much more as they're getting older. And it's just never the same quality quite as ours, but that's okay because they're always getting better and better. Maybe practice saying to your kids, "It's okay if it's not perfect as long as it's done." That being said, you can still have higher expectations. You don't have to have super low expectations, but not so high that it's unrealistic and everybody's angry at each other all the time. When I was talking to my client about this and she requested some of these things for tools to help her, as she was telling me the story, she was very much talking about her husband like he was a child. Like he is incapable of doing all of these things. And the more that she talked, the more that I realized a big component of this was her inability to let go and to stop trying to dictate what's going on in everyone else's lane. Now, there's a little bit of that has to happen with home managers, and yet it was a little bit excessive. So letting go doesn't mean giving up. It just means trusting others and focusing on what truly matters. So here are just a few very simple tips. Focus on that circle of control and ask yourself this: is this something I can control, or do I need to let it go? Very simple. The second thing is accept mistakes as learning opportunities. So allow your spouse or your kids to learn from their choices without stepping in, because those are the best teachers. Like if they forget their homework the second day in a row, you don't, or like maybe you just simply say, I'm sorry, I can't bring it to you today. I wish I could help out, but I'm not available. You don't have to over-explain. You can explain later on as you talk about it and when they're going to be more receptive. I want to share a personal story here. Last month, I found myself constantly reminding my daughter to pick up her trails, that I call them, because there's trails everywhere where she goes. And every day it was the same battle. And I felt my frustration growing and almost looking forward to her moving out to not have to deal with this anymore, but just wanting to grind my teeth a lot. And then I remembered these things that I know, that I teach people all the time. So instead of nagging, I sat down with her and I used the I statement. And I said, I feel really frustrated when I'm repeating the same things over and over about you leaving your things out. It requires more work from me, and it makes the house feel really messy. And when the rest of us are doing our chores, it feels like it doesn't really matter because it's just getting messy right away again. And then I talked to her about collaboration and choices. Like, would you rather that I just gather them up in a bag and put them in the garage? Or do you want to put a reminder on your phone? Or how do you suggest that we do this? And we had this discussion about it. What would be best where it could be a win for both of us, so I don't have to micromanage. I don't have to get frustrated and resentful. And she doesn't have to get frustrated with me when I'm escalated or when I'm nagging her. So when I involved her in the solution and gave her some control, then that increased her motivation, and those daily battles very much improved. Now, did they completely go away? No. Sometimes she still needs those gentle reminders, but it helped minimize that because it was simply a conversation instead of this passive-aggressive communication or this really aggressive communication. So let's quickly recap a few of the things that we talked about today. Avoid that micromanaging, that nagging, and that aggressive communication, and instead use assertive communication by using I statements or setting those clear expectations. Involve your family in that problem solving, whether it's your spouse or your kids, and try not to fall into that trap where you are lecturing or bossing them around instead of collaborating with them. And last but not least, practice that letting go and focusing on what truly matters, which is the relationship and that collaboration and that communication. That is an important and integral part of the human experience. When we encourage that follow through, it's about building that trust and that respect and that cooperation in our family. And it is not always easy. I know this firsthand. I deal with it every single day. But as we practice that patience and that grounding that I talked about, like letting go and staying differentiated, which I've talked about in past episodes, as we do that, we can create a more harmonious home and get that collaboration we're seeking without being that dictator. All right, my friends, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on Fulfillment Therapy. I know these simple things will help increase that follow through in your home and improve the quality of your relationships. Remember that those simple, small changes in how we communicate can lead to amazing improvements in our overall life satisfaction and our relationships if we'll do that work. Don't forget to check out our new courses on our website and check out our blog. In the show notes, we have all of the places you can reach us if you want to find us, or if you have any suggestions on topics or anything else, go ahead and check out those links. Until next time. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.